Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Welcome back. It's another episode of the Koala podcast. And very excited this week because I'm talking to a brand new jurisdiction who are just talking about regulating cannabis. And we're going off to West Africa to speak to Dr. Mark Darko, and he heads up the Chamber of Cannabis Industry in that country. I think Mark also works a lot in various investment funds as well in the country, but he'll tell us more about that in a second. But it's very exciting because Ghana, as we were just discussing in the preamble, is really the first West African country to have come out and said, we're going to do this and we want to create a proper regulated environment to create both an industry and an equitable environment for producing cannabis and I presume hemp as well. Dr. Mark Darko, welcome to the Koala podcast. Thank you for taking time to be on the show with us. First up, just a little bit of background about yourself and what brought you towards heading up being the CEO of the Chamber of Cannabis Industry in the country.
Thank you very much, Sean, for the opportunity. And just as Sean introduced me, my name is Dr. Mark Darko. I'm currently the President CEO of the Chamber of Cannabis Industry, Ghana. I bring you warm greetings from the Republic of Ghana and also let you know that there's good news. The good news is that somewhere in 2023, July, the Narcotics Control Commission amendment bill was passed by the Parliament of Ghana, and that legalized cannabis for medicinal use and industrial use. And when the act was passed, the bill became an act. You know, when a bill becomes an act, a legislative instrument also has to be done to regulate the industry. So somewhere around December 2023, the LI was done as well. So as I speak, here in Ghana officially, cannabis has been legalized for medicinal purposes and also for industrial use. It's not yet legalized for recreational purposes. And so there's limited THC. It is only 0.3% that has been allowed under the Act. So CBD dominated cannabis, so to speak. It's good news for us. We are currently dealing with the stigma that we all have to deal with. We know that cannabis comes along with a lot of stigma. Historically, we know that Ghana has been a user of cannabis. Our forefathers were using cannabis for medicinal purposes. But when the colonial days came, somehow cannabis was wrongly classified along hard drugs like cocaine and heroin, you know, and so over the years, cannabis had been perceived as a hard drug, and so unfortunately, it is very difficult to let people understand that this is business we are talking about. This is a high-value cash crop, especially industrial hemp, and that it is wrong for them to associate it with hard drugs like cocaine and heroin. So what the Chamber of Cannabis Industry is doing presently is that we are doing a lot of public education and sensitization to help the public to understand the positive uses of cannabis so that gradually we can disabuse their minds from the perception of the abuse of cannabis for them to focus rather on the benefits of cannabis, economically speaking, and also for the general health of our country. We have issues with mental health in our country, and so this is why a lot of people are very cautious with the outlaying of the laws and also making it practical for people to come into the cannabis industry. What we are waiting for at the moment, by way of regulation, is for the regulator to come out with the fees and charges for the licenses to go out. So as I speak, no one in Ghana has been given any license yet to cultivate cannabis. So hopefully this first quarter of this year, a new government is in place. We have the 9th parliament now, and a new president has been sworn into power. They should be able to come out clearly with the fees and charges. There are about 11 different licenses prescribed under the legislative instrument. So once that is done, then licenses will begin going out, and we'll go fully into cultivation of cannabis, value addition, of course, and export as well.
You're having,
Hello, Sean.
so you'll be creating cultivation licenses, export licenses, and medical prescribing licenses. How does prescribing medical cannabis, or how is it thought that prescribing medical cannabis will work within Ghana? Does it go through the public health system, or are there going to be private medical cannabis companies who are allowed to prescribe cannabis? And in terms of ownership, does that have to be fully Ghanaian owned companies, or are they 51-49s, 50-50s? How will that be working?
Okay, so the last question first. In terms of ownership, the 51-49 structure is in place. So a Ghanaian you have to have a Ghanaian partner if you're a foreign person who wants to get into cannabis in Ghana. But a Ghanaian must have 51 and a foreigner 49. The act was done to protect the interests of the local players, the indigenes, I mean. Now, when it comes to medical application of cannabis, just as I said in the inception, the law allows for only 0.3%. So it looks like THC is not allowed yet, So we simply at this stage looking at cannabinoids like CBD. But I assume that it is the R&D license that will allow medical practitioners to use cannabis for medicinal use under the current act.
And will medicinal cannabis, because it's been regulated, does it have to be Ghanaian produced medicinal cannabis, or can it be imported by Ghanaian companies from overseas?
Both options are possible. Personally, as the CEO of the Chamber of Cannabis Industry, my focus is on industrialization. We want to add value to the cannabis internally. Africa in general, and Ghana in particular, is an import-driven economy. We import almost everything we consume. We are not industrialized yet, which is why we are still a developing economy. I believe that if the opportunity is there for us to add value to the cannabis, so that we're able to create the medicines internally, it will serve it will be in our best interest, and we'll be able to also export the finished goods. So my focus is on adding value to the cannabis so that it doesn't become like what happened with cocoa, where here in Ghana, we don't add any value. We just ship the cocoa raw, and value is added abroad and it's brought back to us at a very expensive price. So if we're able to put the industries together in a way that value will be added to cannabis internally, it will serve the long-term, the short-term and the long-term good of our country and our economy. So yes, both are possible. The law allows for import. So if you want to import anything cannabis related, you have to have the import license. But if you're adding value and you also have a market that you want to supply, you definitely need to have an export license as well. Yes.
And have they worked out the nitty-gritty of investment rules? So you mentioned the cocoa industry. You could talk about mining, and we know this is the post-colonial history of the whole of Africa, is companies coming in with very loose rules and controlling the entire economic process of producing a primary material or extraction. Have the rules been written as yet that in a way protect the Ghanaian future medical cannabis and industrial hemp industry, so that these same issues don't come up again and you have companies coming in from wherever, whether they be, they could be European, they could be Chinese, they could be American, could be Canadian. I'm sure all those companies and how they like to have things work in their favor. Have the legislators really dug deep into creating a framework that really works for the Ghanaian end of the company?
Yes, I'm happy you mentioned the mining industry, for instance. The influx of Chinese investors into the mining industry, and they're taking over, so to speak. It is not all negative. I'm not here to condemn them, but we can say, and I'm sure you are aware, that the laws that were done those days were not really done well to favor the Ghanaian participants. The LI for cannabis is quite different. Like I initially said, when it comes to ownership, the LI prescribes that a Ghanaian holds majority stake by way of equity. So I think that that has really been very helpful, and it will ensure that there's local participation. So the Ghanaian indigenes will really be direct beneficiaries of what cannabis is capable of doing.
And is Ghana looking to discuss with other, not just West African nations, but countries throughout the continent? You mentioned in our preamble, for example, with Morocco. Are there thoughts on how you would be working with other jurisdictions, maybe to start thinking about how Africa as a continent and all the jurisdictions within Africa can formulate something that works for Africa rather than working for Europe, North America, or China?
Yes, I'm sure, Sean. I'm sure you're aware of the AFCFTA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, that is in place, that is going to ensure that there is free movement of goods and services within the 54 African countries. So under the AFCFTA treaty, and of course, also depending on how licensing and regulation goes in countries within the African countries, we should be able to trade among ourselves. I'm very confident that Morocco and the other countries that have legalized cannabis in Africa are also members of the AFCFTA. In that case, Ghana can trade with them. I mean, with cannabis, we can ship to Morocco, for instance, if we need to ship there. Morocco can also ship to us if we need to, using the AFCFTA vehicle.
And now, just to concentrate a little bit more on West Africa and to ask you a couple of what ifs. You're first, you're first out of the block. Who do you think's coming up next? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion for quite a while about Nigeria, but
yeah,
I sense that there was 18 months ago, there was a lot of discussion, then it seemed to gone a bit quiet. I'm not on the continent. I'm not connected like you are. What's your feeling about what's happening in Nigeria at the moment?
Well, Nigeria is a big country and a federal state. So decision making in Nigeria is not as easy as it might be for a country like Ghana. But I know that, like you said, they've taken steps. But legally speaking, the act is not in place. So cannabis is still illegal there. But I know countries like Gambia, Liberia are also taking steps. You call them baby steps. I mean, if you want. However, the good news is that they've started taking some steps. So hopefully, if Ghana rolls this out fully and they see how Ghana is benefiting, they will also follow suit, and we'll really see them jumping onto the bandwagon and also doing exactly what we are doing. So hopefully we'll have some West African countries joining Ghana, learning from us and replicating what we are doing here. But for now, Ghana has taken the lead. We have started, and I'm sure everybody is waiting to see how we can roll this out, fully, and how we can become beneficiaries, and they can follow suit.
How long do you think the period is before you have a sort of operating system within Ghana and some investment that allows industrial hemp production and processing? Is it a 2-year, a 5-year, or a 10-year process?
When it comes to timelines, we expect that this year, the fees and charges will be out. Once the fees and charges are out, then we can begin applying for the licenses. I'm sure you know that here in Ghana, cannabis grows all year round, and it's not a seasonal crop here. And so when the fees and charges are out, and applicants begin applying for the licenses and they receive their licenses signed by the Minister of Interior, then they should go straight into the cannabis production. We're looking at the farmers first, And so this year, if the fees and charges are out and the licenses begin going out, then this year we should be able to start cultivating cannabis. There are a lot of people, especially members of our chamber, that have come here who have huge hectares of land already, simply waiting for the fees to be out so that they can apply for their license and start cultivating. So we should be able to get cannabis products coming from Ghana beginning 2025, hopefully.
And the cannabis industry isn't just growing cannabis, processing it. Of course, a lot of the cannabis industry is all the what they call in the US the non-plant touching technology, distribution, professional services. Is the government thinking about policies that allow young Ghanaians to enter the industry other than just being a grower or a seller, so to speak? Are they providing are they thinking about education and providing resources that allow all that wonderful intellectual property that you've got amongst your young, the future lawyers, the future accountants, the future especially technology people? I mean, all over the world. I'm in Indonesia. The country is, it might be run by the older people, but underneath it's all the younger people with their technology skills who are, earning money for the country. And I presume, Ghana must be a very young country as well. How is the government thinking, and also organizations like yourself, about bringing the best and the brightest into the industry so it can be as successful as it wants to be?
Yes, Sean, I'm happy you mentioned organizations such as the one that I lead, because you and I know that government is not in the business of doing business. What government only does is to provide the enabling environment for private sector participation and for institutions such as my own to be able to help and to champion things like these. So government has provided the act through parliament. They are done with a legislative instrument. What the chamber is doing now is that we are putting together all participants in the cannabis industry, from farmers to people who are desirous of setting up seed banks to supply the farmers, people who are desirous of setting up, let's say, testing labs. I mean, it's a long value chain and a huge ecosystem. So also we know that this is novel, this is new, and if we are not very careful, we can make mistakes, because some countries that have preceded us have made some mistakes in the past, and we don't want to repeat such mistakes. So what the Chamber of Cannabis Industry has done is that we have launched a training center here in our premises, where before you get into cannabis, it's not just a matter of putting together a business plan and going to the regulator for a license, but you have to understand the business that you are getting yourself into. Cannabis is such a complex, can be very intricate. So we have set up a training center, and we've put together a team of very experienced facilitators, both from Ghana and international, other countries like Canada as well, and USA, so that we can put this team together and use the team to facilitate training, to be able to properly teach the Ghanaian participants, help them navigate the legal complexities, and to be able to do the business legally and sustainably and successfully without too much risk. So that's the role that the chamber is playing. We are training, we are teaching, we are sensitizing. We just want to help people to know the business of cannabis properly and to get into it and to do it profitably.
And
so that's our role. That's what we are doing, not government. So.
Yeah, but I think it's equally important. I'm sure you would agree with me that what you're doing should also be training tertiary institutions to understand how they can make further opportunities. And I presume you need to train government. You need to train the judiciary. You need to train a whole range of levels of the official setup within Ghana, so they understand what cannabis is. Because this is the one thing I've noticed, that doesn't matter which jurisdiction you are anywhere in the world, those are the people, although they're allowed to make the rules, they understand cannabis literally less than anybody else. I mean, have you had now government of said we're going to do this? Are they coming to you and saying, can you also explain to us how it's done? Because as you say, that they're not in the game of building the industry, but the more that the industry is successful, the more that they'll need to understand it. And yeah, as a person who writes about law, one thing I've discovered is that people like the judiciary are especially undereducated on this issue.
I mean, you are absolutely right. It's not just about us and the cannabis business people, so to speak. Institutions like the judiciary are also very important, especially to be able to understand what is legal and what is illegal. What we are doing now is that we are using the media space, for instance, just like we are doing today with you. I've severally been interviewed by several media houses here in Ghana, radio stations, TV stations. But we should also, I think the point you made about having perhaps a one-on-one training also for some of these institutions of government that matter in this is also very important. I'll take note of that, and then I'll advise my team that we also have to find a way of focusing on these institutions, especially judiciary and other organs of government that really need proper education in cannabis. Because cannabis is when it comes to cannabis, everybody is a bit careful, because of all the stigma, and you need a lot of talking. You need to be able to help people understand that cannabis is no more what they think it is, that the world is moving forward and times have changed. They need to understand that this is business, But I mean, we have started. The good news is that we have started, and hopefully over a very short period of time, we should be able to get all these people on board and properly sensitize them.
So do you think you've got a lifetime of work ahead of you? I think we'll both be very old men before any sort of it feels balanced. I think it's a long road, isn't it?
It is. It's a long road. It's a long road. But I think if we're able to properly demonstrate how beneficial this is and how it is going to add to our GDP growth, how it is going to create jobs for our youth, how it is going to support the economy, then we should be able to make a headway. Because at the moment, Ghana is one of the countries that I can say is highly indebted. Our debt to GDP ratio is very high, So the country is looking for alternative sources that can bring capital into the economy, so that our budget deficits can be taken care of. We can service our external debts and all that, so that we can also stabilize our local currency. So if we're able to demonstrate that this is something Ghana should be looking at and Ghana should be paying close attention to, then although we have a long way to go, I believe that within a short period of time, we'll have a full embrace of this, and then we should be fine.
Now, you mentioned a few moments ago, and we haven't got long to go, but I'm interested because media, general media, especially in countries like the UK, are fairly negative about cannabis, and they always like to report the crime stories. And how are you finding talking to media in Ghana? Is it a positive outlook, or is it still a bit of a struggle for them not to sort of laugh or smile at you when they're having the conversation?
Sure, it's 50-50. Sometimes when the media people invite me and I'm there, and after a conversation, they open the phone lines for people to call in to share their opinion or to.
And I'm sure in Ghana there's plenty of opinion.
Plenty of opinion, but it's divided. What I see is that those who are a bit educated, if we talk about these things and they do some research, they are able to understand exactly what we are talking about. But we have a bunch of people who are not educated too, and they are only relying on what they have heard, and so we have to go to the grassroots to be able to get all these people on board and to be able to help them understand. Because the illicit market, the black market of cannabis in Ghana is there. It's all over the place. I'm sure you know that.
Well,
when
I
it
mean,
comes to,
it's no different from any other country. Even
you know,
even in the US, which has regulated states, the black market is 3 times the size. It's nobody's particular problem. If you create prohibition, that's over 100-year period, or in Ghana longer because you've had the colonial laws. The problem is created, and it's not going to disappear within 24 months. It's a long-term battle. And what I've noticed, and you say we don't have long to run, is the black market actually grows in the short term as rules are loosened a bit, and the police and security forces and the government not really sure when they should arrest or prosecute people. It's hard to get that balance, and it takes a while for it all to sort of slowly balance out. I mean, my view is Ghana's going to be way ahead of, say, the UK, because you've decided to tackle the problem earlier. It doesn't mean the problem's going to go away.
that's the good news. So what we are, even from the act, the legislature is looking at how they can roll out these things very gradually. That's why the psychoactive part has been taken out, and it allows for only 0.3%. So if I'm interviewed or I speak to people, I always want to, put a sense stress on that part, that this is not the type of cannabis that allows for smoking. So if you are worried that the youth will embrace cannabis because it's been, to be perceived to be open to everybody to use cannabis, then know that the cannabis that has been allowed for now is not the psychoactive one. We're talking industrial hemp and some CBD. But I know that if you roll out over a period of time and they see how successful the industry is becoming, then gradually they can increase the THC.
Dr. Mark Darko, thank you very much. We're almost out of time. Thank you very much for being on the Karma Koala podcast and throwing some light on the fact that Ghana is on a serious road to regulation,